Hey, 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 USU listeners. It's Julie, and I am so excited to be here with you. Thank you for tuning in and just being an awesome listener and guest and being part of this community. Love having you here. And you are going to love, love, love my guest today. He is amazing and has so much wisdom and just some cool stories and things to share with you. So I want to introduce you to Tucker Wannamaker. He is the co-founder of Thrive Impact. Every nonprofit and its leader deserves to thrive as individuals, personally and professionally, so they can have the impact that our communities need from them. That's why Tucker is focused on helping nonprofit leaders energize their revenue, staff, boards, and stories through intensive coaching, experiential learning, fresh strategies, and the culture and mindset change needed to make it happen. Over the last 15 years, Tucker has been in a variety of mission-driven leadership roles, including building an award-winning nonprofit marketing agency that he sold, super cool, leading fundraising campaigns that brought millions in the door, years as an outside strategic revenue and change management coach for nonprofits, and leading a startup nonprofit through a challenging season of accelerated growth and onward to sustainability. A little more about this big-hearted entrepreneur. Tucker rides an old 1980 Vespa. Love that. He has 4 kids. You heard that right. 4 that are radical. And he loves taking them on bike rides and hikes. And he thinks that's because it's the native Colorado in him. He also loves to wear flip-flops, I found out, in the snow. And he loves to take them to see awesome museums in the DC area. The best part of all of this is that he has been with his amazing wife of 15 years who's into all of this and gets more and more lovely every year. Hashtag not even joking. Seriously. A quote that inspires Tucker that I got to share. I love this. I'm going to botch the last name of the person who wrote this, but I thought you guys would really appreciate this. This is the quote that inspires Tucker, is that if you want to build a ship, don't drum up people to collect wood and don't assign them tasks and work, but rather teach them to long for the endless immensity of the sea. That is by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. And you can find out more about Tucker and Thrive Impact at thriveimpact.org. So with that, without further ado, I am so excited to bring you on the show, Tucker.
Yes.
Welcome.
Oh, I'm so excited as well. It is so great to see you and be here.
So fun. Right away when we connected and met, I was like, who is this? And I just, one of the things I loved about you was clearly, and I said this earlier, your heart and your connection to wanting to make a difference and an impact, which clearly is the name of your organization. So I set that up. Before we get into all these things that you've done and Thrive Impact, I just would love for people to get to know a little more about your USU.
Who is my meest me?
Tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe kind of what's gotten you so passionate about nonprofits and helping them and riding Vespas from 1980 and wearing flip-flops in the snow. Like, tell us all things Tucker Wannamaker.
Well, I certainly love nature, and I love, one thing I realized about myself, why I hate running so much, but I love bike riding, which also includes riding a Vespa, is I love breezes in my face.
Oh, yeah.
So that's a little bit about me. I just do not like running. I like sprinting and like team sports, but I love nature. Like, I find it's divine for me to be in nature, and we have a stream right next to our house in Arlington, Virginia, and just going and sitting by the stream in and of itself, and being within nature, going on hikes. I'm really a mountain kid. I mean, I love oceans too, but like I really love mountains, and it's like, that place where you just like your lungs are able to open up. And you're like,
yeah.
Oh my, so there's just like God is there for me, and like I feel like I'm able to connect with the divine of sorts in nature. So that's a little bit about me. A little bit about my I keep wanting to say my meest me, which is funny, but
I love it. No, we say that.
But like one of the reasons why I love that quote is I used to, before I even was in the nonprofit space for a while, was I had started a marketing company a while back, and I remember I don't know, it was like this vision of sorts of diving into the mud pit. I mean, I literally like saw myself diving into this mud pit, scraping away all the layers of mud and crap that had been layered upon somebody, and like reaching in and finding that beautiful thing that was there and saying, this is what you've been looking for, right?
Mm.
And it was, and part of that was under this like more branding type of shop that we were trying to build. But it's sort of like the essence of like, why are you here on this board? Why are you doing this business that you're doing? Why are you doing this nonprofit? And helping people uncover. I remember before I was in marketing or at that marketing company, I was actually in the real estate world, but I was working with real estate agents. And I remember seeing like they were also bombarded by all these technology tools. Like they go to, real estate conferences like Inman and all these variety of different ones. And I would see that they were all just bombarded. So I actually created this education program called Translate. Like, how do you translate all these things that are out there to who you are?
Yeah.
To like what makes sense for your real estate business? What makes sense for the type of person that you are that will allow you to shine? And so a lot of that for me is, which is why I love that Saint-Exupéry quote, is because there's sort of like, how do we tap into that sort of that goodness and that, to me, of sorts divine from within?
Yeah.
To help people scrape away some of those layers that have been layered upon by them, to help them remember why they're here in the first place.
Yeah.
So for me, like that's why I love that quote. That's why I love the work that I'm doing, especially around nonprofits. And then as I've been working in the nonprofit sector, on all kinds of different fronts, both as like I had them as marketing clients. I've actually been in the trenches as a marketer and a fundraiser for nonprofits. I started one back in Colorado to raise money for wildfire relief efforts.
Oh, wow.
With a lot of my friends. And then now we're obviously like all in around nonprofits, but like the injustice I feel like I want to right in the world is that there's just too many people working on the most important issues of our day getting totally fried.
Yeah.
Getting totally burned out. And to me, those are layers of things of sometimes lack of perspective, sometimes too much tension around revenue and just economics.
Yeah.
I've got 4 kids. I have to figure out, ways to pay for that, right? Like economics are a real deal. Like in all of our lives. As my good buddy Josh used to say, he was the guy we used to work with on PR, and he's like just a Bostonian, just cuts right to the core.
Nice.
And me and my old co-founder of the marketing company were getting all upset about something. I don't even remember what it was, but he was like, y'all, at the end of the day, we all got to pay the rent. Like we're all in some form of survival, right? It's like, that's real raw humanity here. Right. And it was just this reminder of like, we're humans, and how do I help with the work that I'm doing, help people remember that that's who they are. Like, and it's okay. Like you have things that you got to figure out. And so if you're a nonprofit CEO and you're in this, you're in this incredibly lonely place, because it's one of the loneliest jobs out there, because you're this linchpin between a board of directors that are your bosses and the staff, and you're like in the middle between the two, and who do you talk to? And like one of the biggest things that we talk about this at Thrive is that one of the biggest pains that we are trying to solve at Thrive Impact is the pain of loneliness. It is painful. I mean, there's all this talk out there about the epidemic of loneliness right now.
Yeah.
In general, it is a very real, prevalent thing within nonprofits, and especially the CEOs. So anyway, I'm totally going off, but that's a little bit of my meest me here, which is like, is what is that underlying essence, and like, and then how do I help people? I was going through like a really challenging time. I've lived in DC for about a little over 5.5 years, and like 2 years into it, it was like deep, hard time for me. And I remember calling somebody who was like a leadership coach for me back in Colorado. And I was like, when you think about me, like, what do you think about? Like I was having, existential, like, and she said, Tucker, when I think about you, I think of somebody who helps people feel comfortable getting out of their comfort zones. And it was really helpful for me to understand that and to hear her say that, because when you get down into that area of your USDU, if you will, use your language, like there's vulnerability there.
Yeah.
And that's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It can be uncomfortable because it's scary. And and so I loved that image of sorts of like, how can I and have a team of that? How can we come alongside as partners to help people feel comfortable getting out of their comfort zones in order for them to get to where they actually really want to go? And so that's a lot of like me, if you will, and that's a lot of what drives us at Thrive Impact too, is helping these nonprofit CEOs and subsequently their teams get out of their comfort zones, because they need to pivot and they need to shift. And nonprofits are going through a massive amount of transition right now. So there you go. How's that?
That is awesome. Oh my gosh. Friends listening in, I'm like, I have so many questions. My hand is writing. I'm like, okay, one at a time. Now, this was awesome. And I think what you talked about, I want to come back to the loneliness piece and about getting out of your comfort zone. You said something earlier on, just to reflect back. And actually, before I even start with that, one of the things I loved you said is this really, what it sounds like, and I think a lot of us get this, is that connecting through nature to your divine essence, and that's really helped you to stay connected to yourself. It sounds like being in nature, which I'm a huge fan of as well. And you had mentioned that you've done this with the kind of the marketing branding side of things, really helping people to find, or companies to find out, tap into that essence, and really even like the best, why they're doing what they're doing. And I'm thinking for those listening in, some who are entrepreneurs, some who have businesses, some who just, I felt like, God, that's a great question for anybody. Like, and I'm wondering if you have any question or two that you would ask these in the marketing branding world, but maybe that could be applicable to those listening in that are like, okay, how do I find my divine essence? Like, how do I find that? Because I think people are always asking that. Tell us, Tucker. No pressure here.
No. I mean, self-awareness is such a big part of the game. And ultimately being okay with oneself. For me, I come from a long faith journey from the Christianity perspective. Like, Jesus is that's real for me, and that's a big part of my journey. And but it certainly involved pain along the way.
Yeah.
It's involved massive paradigm shifts. I mean, I even think back to when I was 16 and I went to Africa, and like that. I was this punk kid who actually was really praised a lot growing up. Like, I have very loving mom and dad, and especially from a lot of the pastors that I was around. Like, I knew how to work it. I knew how to get it. And I'm just this punk kid who thinks he's like all that. And I go to Africa, and I'm sitting in this Maasai hut in Kenya of the Maasai. They're camel herders. They literally live in mud huts. I have to duck in to get in there. Because I'm 6'2", and I have to keep my head down because they have a fire in the middle and the smoke is like up to my head. Well, I just can't breathe that in. And I'm sitting there as this total punk kid who thinks he's all kinds of cool. And, I'm this Christian kid, and here's this Christian Maasai man. And I'm like, how did that happen?
Wow.
Like, this world is, whoa. Like, there is so much more to the story.
Yeah.
And I think it was from there that I was like, oh, well, I'm not that big of a deal.
Yeah, there's more going on than...
I'm really not that big of a deal. And,
right.
Wow. And so to me, it's like this journey of curiosity. It's this, like, there's so much more to the story of all that's going on around us. Yeah. And I tend to be really externally driven and oriented, like what's going on out in the world and ideas and fun. Like, I love that stuff, especially over the last probably 5 years of living in DC. I kind of jokingly, because I'm definitely extroverted, but I've kind of jokingly said this to some of my friends, like, I've been learning how to be an introvert.
Yeah.
And I've learned and part of this is through pain, but like, I've realized of being curious about myself. Yeah. And curiosity has no judgment to it.
Yeah.
Curiosity is like this exploration of like, I wonder what's there. And I've started to like, and this is through people coaching me. So it's not been like, I've just had this divine revelation. It's like through community and people helping me and realizing that there's, people can actually help you get through these things. But starting to have some curiosity about who I am. Yeah. And I've like, case in point, like I've realized over the course of my life, I've not generally dealt with guilt
Mm.
My wife is a very different person, and guilt has like plagued her for
Mm.
many years, and it's a heavy burden for her.
Yeah.
Like it just hasn't been a thing until this last year, and part of it has to do with kids too, especially.
Yeah.
I've realized like I've because I realize what I value, and then some of these things around the ticking clock of my own children, like they're getting older. I mean, you know this, Julie.
Oh yeah. Cray cray. Yeah. You're like,
They're getting
what?
older, and they're getting older quick.
Yeah.
And I only have this period of time right now, and so
Yeah.
all this work that I'm doing, because being an entrepreneur, I mean, you know this, like there's so many people who are entrepreneurs out there
Yeah.
who not have to, I should say, we've chosen this.
Yeah.
We're not in the have tos, we're in the choose tos as an entrepreneur.
Right.
But like, I also choose my children, and I choose my wife, and like,
yeah,
I want to make sure that I'm able to have those choices. And so I've started to feel, now I've gotten more clarity of sorts of who I am.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm starting to feel guilty. Like, how do I deal with this? And
yeah.
anyway, but like, I think that's where, going back all the way to the Africa story of, I realized that there is just so much more to the collective story. There's so much more to your story, Julie, to my story. And then again, from the self-awareness perspective, can I allow myself to go there?
Yeah.
And I remember, as a last quick story, is actually when we had my first child. We have 2 boys, 2 girls, and my oldest is a girl. Her name's Addison, which is joy. And I remember when I first had her, and I actually caught her. So we had home births and all this stuff.
Wow, so cool.
It was amazing. And I actually caught my daughter. It was a crazy cool experience. It was
wow.
Yeah, it was amazing. That's a whole other story.
With flip-flops on.
Probably, actually. But I remember holding her and thinking, I actually started to understand why a dad could become a deadbeat dad.
Mm-hmm.
Because I realized that this is vulnerable.
Yeah.
And vulnerability is really scary.
Yeah.
Hence, I mean, it's like by nature, that's what it is. Which is where, like, you teach all like Brene Brown's amazing work. You know, courage is like stepping through vulnerability.
Yeah.
And that's where courage lies, is like, oh, I'm unsure. But I was at that point when I'm holding Addison, I'm like, oh my gosh, this hits a spot I didn't even realize I had.
Wow.
I didn't know I was there. And I could totally see how people would want to get away from that, because that's way too scary. That's way too vulnerable.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm like, okay, how can I have just a little, like, lean on the side of a little more curiosity about my life, my own heart, my own mind, my own self, and also a little more curiosity around other people. And so which helps me take away judgment. Because when I stop doing that, my default is starting to get critical.
Yeah.
And when I start getting critical of people, that's a signal to me that, oh, something's off in myself. So anyway,
Oh, I love it. Are you kidding? This is like, I'm like a plant with water. I mean, and it's amazing. No, and I think for those tuning in, here's the thing. I'm just to reflect a little bit, Tucker. I think what you're saying to kind of connect it all, it's amazing wisdom, because you had talked earlier about, tapping in is really about self-awareness. You start to say that. And, with self-awareness, I love this focus you were talking about with curiosity. I'm so with you, because when we get curious, what we're doing is we're asking questions, and you were saying, like, then you let go of judgment, which allows you to be really, truly present. And then what can come up is that, you said it's vulnerability. So many people, I mean, use things like, I struggled with food addiction. People use alcohol, social media, gossiping, whatever. And one of the things I just adore and think is amazing about you is your willingness to just be, I mean, even right now, like, just fully all out, real, authentic, and vulnerable. And, that's where I know Brene talks about, that's where you have the range of emotions. Like, that's where you can feel pure joy. Because you can have that range when you're allowing yourself. Yeah,
it's so true.
It's awesome. And I love I can't believe you caught your daughter. That is so cool.
What an experience.
To your wife.
All 4 of the kids were at home.
Wow.
And 2
wow.
were the births and 2 were not. And it was just, all of them were just their own experience, and amazing.
Wow. That is so cool. So cool. I just before we get more into like Thrive Impact and what you're doing, which is just amazing, you did bring up a topic I think is so prevalent right now around loneliness, because whether you're the CEO of a nonprofit or you're a stay-at-home mom and you know are with your kids all day and you feel this, or you're maybe even at the top of your game and you can still feel loneliness. I mean, it's definitely something that's plaguing, I think, our society these days. And I'm curious what you've learned, some of the ways to kind of really overcome it, just what you've learned and what you've seen.
I mean, I had a pastor once tell me and he was telling me, because he was a man and I'm a man obviously too, but he said the biggest killer of men is isolation.
Yeah.
I think it's the biggest killer of people, obviously. But
Yeah.
you know, really, it was in my 20s, and it really struck with me of even the times like, you know, we actually, my wife and I, as you said, we just celebrated our 15th anniversary. Back in, you know, I mean, I remember back in like our second year of marriage, and I was starting to get these, like, I didn't ask for them, but I was like questioning everything about our marriage. And it was like 2 years in, or maybe a year and a half. It wasn't that long. Like, we just had this, and I started to think about like it, you know, all this stuff was just sort of sitting there.
Yeah.
And like turning into toxins for me in a sense. And and that's because like I was holding it in, and it wasn't, it was isolating. I was isolating myself because I can't really process through this with my wife. Like, that's really awkward.
Right.
But like, who do I talk to? How do I just process it? Right. I didn't ask for these thoughts. Right. I wasn't like, you know what? I know that I just got married a year and a half ago, but I'd really love some thoughts right now around second guessing everything, you know? Right. No, I didn't ask for that. Yeah. Like,
not fun.
They are, though, and I don't know why,
right.
but I have to process it somehow. And that was a good example of me. And I remember, then I remember that pastor had told me that, and I was like, okay, I gotta find a guy who, you know, who is older than me, who has the type of marriage that I would want to have. I mean, you know, mentor type person.
Yeah.
Talk to them. Like, maybe I can figure out how that looks. And that was vulnerable. Like, am I okay? Is it okay for me to talk about these things? Should I talk about these things? Like, are they going to judge me? And I mean, that's a lot of the stuff that I remember feeling. Yeah. Going into that, and I was able to talk to. His name was David. And he's just one of the smartest. He's like a social worker in Colorado Springs, and one of the smartest men I've ever experienced. And he just calls people on their bullshit too, like so fast.
Oh, that's so great.
Because he's just been in the nitty gritty trenches of social work, and he's seen it all. And so, anyway. But like, just being able to talk through this with somebody, and in my case, I am a verbal processor. I've noticed, like, you know, like, especially watching my kids, like my eldest daughter is not a verbal processor. Right. Rather write things down, and then we write back and forth. I'm noticing communication styles, like that's important. Again, the self-awareness piece of
that's awesome.
How I communicate and how I receive communication. But side point. But I was able to just actually process these things. And because what I really do want underneath it all, and I think this is where what everybody wants, is we all just want to be in a place of love and connection with people. Yeah. Oh yeah. To be known, to know, and to be known. And which kind of gets back to the vision I had of, you know, for me growing up in all reality, in Christianity, in modern Christianity in America. Yeah. You know, and this is pulling in some of the theology and the faith side, but to me, there usually is this concept around like original sin, and we're all evil and bad, and I realized, I was like, no, sin is actually a perversion of something, and that meaning like something had to be there in which to be perverted, aka that something was good. Exactly. And I think that for me, I've been. And I facilitated a community group at my house around some of this stuff around church. And it's like, there is good and divine in all of us. Yeah. Whether, you know, Christianity or not, but like, to me, my approach to this is, which is why the curiosity is there, is because to me, like, the curiosity is let's slowly but surely, and sometimes not slowly but surely, but slowly but surely, like, scrape away the layers, because I know that there's something beautiful there. in you, in me, like in everybody. It's
Oh
meant to
yeah.
be that way. There's
Yeah.
it's good first.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
how do we find that? How do we uncover that and be more curious with ourselves? Because we're not inherently evil. Now, do people do evil things? Absolutely. And
Yeah.
should we try to stop evil things from happening? Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's not saying that there isn't evil in the world, but I think the core of it comes from good, and then things are
Yeah.
perverted and then turn into evil or sin or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And so, but we all have these thoughts about ourselves. Like, I had a mentor once tell me that that our weaknesses are really our strengths not being managed.
Ooh, I like
Like,
that.
like I have a natural confidence of sorts to myself, but like whenever I get insecure,
Right.
the manifestation of that for me is arrogance. This is
Oh,
right? Because here I am, I'm going to point the fingers at you which is an arrogant position. And what
yeah.
that really means is I'm feeling insecure.
Right. So great. That's great
Right?
awareness. Great awareness. Wow.
But those are the types of things for us of like, how do we have that curiosity about ourselves and see that what these things are. Like I have a kid, one of my sons, Thomas, who's actually named after me. My real name is Thomas, and he's Thomas the Sixth, actually.
Woo! That's cool.
But Thomas he's what we call a limit pusher. He's not a rule follower. He's a limit pusher, and we actually started changing. Like my wife was starting to say like he's being manipulative because my wife is a rule follower,
Yeah.
and we actually had a counselor that we were working with at the time. It's like, let's adjust that language, because I was actually using it too.
Yeah.
And they were like, let's adjust that language to be, he's strategic,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I was like, and that's the thing with Thomas, like he sees a limit. He's like, let's see if it's really a limit.
Yeah.
Like that's a strength. Right?
Yeah.
That's a gift that needs to be brought to the world. And just like every other gift needs to learn how to be managed.
Yeah, totally.
And so, but we can look at it from the angle, like, of you're being manipulative.
Yeah.
Help him like guide that gift and learn how to manage that strength. So that it becomes a strength and a value to others around him and to himself, as opposed to hurting others and himself around.
I love this conversation, what you're saying. It's funny. I'm like, he's going to be a great entrepreneur.
Go, Thomas, go.
Yeah, go push the edges. But really looking at your strengths, and then this idea that we're all, many ways to say it, all from the same good thing, from the same, divine essence, just that idea that we all stem from that, and that we all have strengths, but when they're, if we're feeling lack, that they can be, like you were saying so vulnerably, like your confidence can be turned when you're insecure. The way to deal with it is to bloat it out. And others do the other way. There's the other side of the stick, which is to become completely passive or, not have a voice. So, and I love it. It goes back to what you said. I cannot agree more. This is about self-awareness. That's why that's part of the reason this show exists. And I believe in it. And what you're talking about, the more that, for those listening, the more you can do that work to get to know yourself, like what you're saying, Tucker, it's added so much value. And then, what you're doing in the world, I mean, so now that you have this understanding of yourself, it just adds a whole different dimension and allows you to be free to really give back. And would love to talk about that a little bit with Thrive Impact, because what you're part of is so, I was right away it was like, my gosh, this is amazing work you're doing. Can you talk a little bit about both the mission and the kinds of clients you work with? And then I'll just pause for there.
Sure. Yeah. Our mission at Thrive Impact is we think that nonprofit CEOs and leaders need to thrive so they can have the impact that our communities need from them. Right.
Yeah.
The more that people are burned out, the less impact they're able to have, and the less pain we're able to solve in the world. Right. And so, to me, from a Thrive Impact perspective, if we can, to me, the injustice I feel like I'm trying to right in the world is I just don't think people should be burned out like that.
Yes.
And these are good people. So like, it's coming at it from an injustice perspective, because I've been that person and it totally sucks. And I look back on that time and I'm really grateful, because I was like dark night of the soul, deep trenches of my life kind of time. But it still totally sucked. Like, like pain in our life is such an amazing teacher, way more than success is.
Oh yeah.
And I'm grateful for it. And I want to help people get out of it if they're in it and find the pathway through.
Yeah.
And so, and not only for them, but for the fact that they're working on, helping young people find their pathway in life, like a nonprofit I used to work at called Youth Service America, or, they're working on really helping, some of the people that we talked to yesterday, Julie, who are helping people, with basic needs like food.
Yeah.
And there's so many issues and causes. And I mean, the nonprofit game is a pain solving game, right? That's the game we're in. We're trying to solve pain in the world, straight up.
Yeah.
There aren't luxury nonprofits, right?
Yeah, I was like, that sounds like, weird.
Yeah, exactly. We're generally speaking, we are trying to solve pain.
Yeah.
And so the more that we can, there's an old quote that I like, which is, if we can want to help, oh gosh, what is it? It's about, like, if you want to heal the world, then heal yourself.
Oh, that's one of my favorite. Whatever the real quote, I believe in that 100%, 100%. Oh yeah.
So that's where, but within a nonprofit, there's a lot of complexity. There's a lot going on. There's personal stuff around how, and we do teach a lot about that, like taking extreme ownership over your work, helping people think, and we do like a paradigm exercise to help people see differently and help them see how their beliefs start to translate into the behaviors that they do, and then how they start to look for things to actually prove themselves right, to reinforce the belief and only do it more. Like we use an example, like when people used to think that the world was flat. Well, some people still think the world's flat, but flat earthers. But when they used to think the world was flat, and then they had this belief that the world was flat.
Yeah,
that would start to lead into assumptions that they had, like if we go beyond, then we're going to fall off the edge, and then that leads to more assumptions of like, well, that's dangerous. And then when people would go out go out beyond and wouldn't come back,
right,
it would reinforce the belief, they must have fallen off. The world is flat.
Right.
Just kept going. And so I use an example in my life of, usually when I'm facilitating, I say, who in this room would raise their hand who has the belief that if you want something done right, you have to do it yourself? And I actually raised my hand because I have that belief too. And the question, this gets back into self-awareness stuff, is beliefs are what they are. Like, they're not bad or good. They are, but they depending upon what you want, they can be limiting to you or not, right? So like, I have a father-in-law who's a real estate appraiser. He's a certified general appraiser in Colorado. He can appraise anything in real estate, like high-end commercial or whatever.
Oh, cool.
He has the belief. I used to talk to him about his business, and I used to ask, like, why don't you have employees? And he's like, train the competition.
Oh, yeah.
He very much has the belief that if you want something done right, you got to do it yourself.
Right.
Now, is that right or wrong is the question.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the only way for us to understand that is based upon what we want.
Yeah.
Right? So in his case, he doesn't want to train the competition. He likes being a solopreneur in his case. That has trade-offs, obviously, but like, he didn't want to build a team, and he's perfectly happy with that. So his mentality of, if you want something done right, you got to do it yourself, has served him just fine based upon what he wants.
Yeah.
But for me, I'm, within Thrive Impact, we're building a team.
Yeah.
We're working with nonprofits. Like, if I want something done right, I got to do it myself is not a very trust building kind of process, right?
Yeah, no, not at all. And won't work well in that environment. Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, I mean, it's fun to teach on things that I know I have to remind myself of.
Totally.
It's like every time I teach on, I'm like, that's a really good reminder, because I want to build what I want. I know this in my life.
Yeah.
Around Thrive Impact in particular, as well as to help teach nonprofits, is how do we build teams that trust one another? Yes. Well, that belief of, if I want something done right, I have to do it myself. Yeah. That does not lead to that, right? There isn't a good pathway. So it is now a self-limiting belief. Yeah. And that's what starts to help us measure whether or not this makes sense. Not, is it right or wrong? It's like, no, just tell me what do you actually want? And then we can get a sense of whether or not your belief is working for you or not. Oh, I love it. So anyway, so that's some of the work on the personal side of the world, of helping people understand beliefs, how to take extreme ownership, shifting their mindset. Mindset is a really big deal. But then there's the organizational front, which is also very important, which is how do we create revenue strategies that actually make sense, and not just always fundraising oriented, but like revenue strategies that translate, helping nonprofits understand the world that they exist in now. I like to say nonprofits are subject to the free market now.
Yeah,
I mean,
totally.
like, we can't just get away with doing nice things. We actually have to provide and show real value in the world.
Right.
And that's, and the more and more funding is built around that, actually, like results, which it makes sense. But before, like I used to work at Youth Service America as an example, and it was all about activating young people in service.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome, right? I'm like, I'm going to say no to 6-year-old Chloe who started Save the Sea Turtles, who's one of my favorites. Like, she was.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, it's like cute, and they're doing volunteerism, and it's
right.
sea turtles, and you're like, oh my gosh, it's amazing.
Right.
But you know, before I was working at YSA, like the revenue started drying up. Well, it's because they were the shift has been happening.
Right.
And they were talking about things like outputs, like here are the nice things we do.
Right.
But not hitting like what actual real tangible value are we bringing about in the world that we can actually have some efficacy around, like some measurement, something.
Right.
And you know, in the nonprofit space, impact is a little bit of an elusive thing because it's not as black and white like profit and not profit, right?
Right.
And usually we teach nonprofits to think about it like you're an attorney building evidence for a case.
Right.
It's not going to be perfect because we're dealing typically with humans or the environment.
Right.
So it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be clear in black and white like profit, you know, black and white in terms of money.
Totally.
But we have to start to measure ourselves against that. Otherwise, it turns to actually a great book called Toxic Charity out there. It turns into toxic charity. It turns into where we don't even realize that what we're doing may actually be hindering. Even though it looks good, the output of the activity is actually not intervening to create to solve pain. It's actually creating more pain, creating dependency, creating problems. And if we're not measuring that stuff, then that becomes a problem for us. But that we have something called our impact cycle. Actually, it's up there. It's
That's okay. I think I see it. For those listening, we can say it.
But it's talking about. Oh yeah, but it's basically like helping nonprofits see that there's a cycle that allows you to be fully sustainable. And we actually use it as a diagnostic tool to help, you know, if your revenue is drying up, for example, or it's stalled or stagnant, that's usually a lagging indicator, meaning it's an indicator of other issues going on in the nonprofit, whether your story or packages aren't accurate, you actually aren't having impact, or your programs altogether need to get totally shifted because the world around you is changing and you haven't changed with it. So that's there's the personal side of it, which is my actual personal side favorite.
I love it.
And then there's the organizational side around, you know, CEO coaching, change management, helping them align their impact cycle, things like that.
So a lot of what is so awesome about this is that you're supporting these incredible nonprofits out to make a significant difference. Like you said, I think earlier, it's solving pain, which, but I love what you're focusing on is the personal development piece. And what I heard,
I like that too.
I mean that, you know, that's kind of my jam, that personal level, because it all starts with, you know, I believe everything is reflected on the outside of how you feel on the inside. So, you know, you talked about really this ownership, looking at your beliefs, your mindset. And I kind of heard under that, like, you know, not being a victim, like really getting and kind of with that curiosity, self-awareness and curiosity. Yeah.
Well, I think I'm totally agree with you on the whole victim thing, which is, I kind of said something earlier that I took from a personal development course that I went through. It was amazing, called Possibilities.
Cool.
Allpossible.co. They're out in San Diego, but unbelievable. But I remember going through it, and it was helping you get perspective on your have tos versus your choose tos. Like,
I love that.
Like when you're in have to, that's a place of I have no choice. I have no agency.
That's great.
But that's a problem. And so if you're feeling more and more like you're in the have tos, which sometimes that's real, like it's a real have to, or sometimes it's like you put it upon yourself, like, I have to be married to this person, or I have to be I don't know, whatever, victimhood that we all are very good at.
Right. The land of
Putting on
victimhood.
ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's why like extreme ownership is such an important piece, which is, it's a little bit of the, I can't remember who had that quote, but I'm the destiny of my soul, type, or I'm the captain of my soul.
Yeah. Oh, I can see the name, but that's okay. I'm not.
I know. I'm
captain of my ship. It's like,
yes.
All right. That's okay. We'll look it up
It was
after.
in some movie. Was it like Nelson Mandela? He said it or something like that.
It might. He said everything amazing. I always say just when in doubt, go to Nelson Mandela. He was brilliant and amazing. Yeah. I love this extreme ownership. I haven't heard that way of saying it because you're talking about really the choice. Have to feels like no choice versus I choose to or I get to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's hard. I mean, when you're getting in, like I have 4 children. That's not cheap. Yeah. Have I felt the have to of I have to provide? Yeah. Like I totally have felt that. And has it felt like a heavy burden sometimes? Oh, totally. Yeah. They're not even in college yet. Like my oldest is 12,
Right.
And like, have I felt the have to, and it feel, did I choose to have 4 children? Well, yes, I did choose to have 4 children.
Yeah.
So, it all ultimately gets back to choices I've made for sure.
Yeah.
And sometimes, with my kids, I'm very grateful to have 4 children. Like I love them. They're delightful and they are radical actually. Along with that, like, there's ramifications of those choices. Yeah. Positive ramifications and negative ones. Yeah. And a lot of that's based upon, my perspective. I usually tell like, whenever people are pregnant for the first time, couples or whomever, that, and they're, if they ever ask me for thoughts just because I have 4 kids, and you're like, oh, you have 4 kids. Oh my gosh. My biggest piece of advice for them is always don't fight the disruption. Yeah. Let the disruption be as it is, because your life is going to be different. Not bad. You can make it bad if you want. Yeah. But it's just going to be different. It's not bad or good. Like, turning things into bad or good is another step that we all make. We all make it very quickly. Yeah. We just don't realize it, but there's another step of things happening, turning it into a judgment of this is bad or this is good, which is always based upon our own perspective and view of the situation in the first place. And that's where, like, when people have, kids for the first time, it is totally a different world. Yeah. And it's going to be disruptive. Straight up. Like, it's going to be disruptive to what your life was. Now, if you continue to want to keep having your life as it was, then like you're going to create conflict for yourself. Yeah. It's going to create more tension for you, as opposed to seeing like, oh, my life is different now. And I made this choice to have this child. Totally. Not everybody has made that choice, but you know what I'm saying in general. Yeah. One of the things actually that just came to mind, you said this really, I think early on about your connection to nature and feeling that, and I'm thinking, to me, so much wisdom comes from nature. I mean, I think all of wisdom, if you really pay attention, and it's like disruption, the more you can, you just said this really, I think it reminded me of, you look at the seasons, the more we can flow with whatever the disruption, in quotes, whatever that the change that's happening, the more that there's less conflict and less strife inside. And so, like you said, moving with it, kind of like water, the element of water is really about movement with and around and being flexible. And super interesting. I think what's so awesome about this conversation, it's like whether you're with a nonprofit or a business or just listening to, grow yourself, like all of this applies. It does. Yeah. Oh, it totally does. Whatever area you're in, if you're, I'm an entrepreneur, you're an entrepreneur, there's, a lot out there, but, even to the nonprofit teams that we're working with, and how do you take extreme ownership over your role as an employee within this nonprofit? Right. Right. Many times this is where like nonprofit people are typically underpaid. It's pretty typical. Yeah. And we're hoping to continue to change that and find more revenue strategies and things like that. But, passion is a currency in the nonprofit lane or in the nonprofit world. And many times passions are over leveraged. Yeah. Right. Because it's a currency that we leverage, which is why we're able to get people to not make as much, because we're tapping into a different form of currency for people. Well said. But that gets over leveraged because passion, like it's in the sense, it's like a bank account. Like you can totally take out too much you know,
Yes.
and people get burned out, and then they're not having the impact that they wanted to have in the first place, and which is why
Totally.
they went to work at that nonprofit most likely in the first place.
Totally.
So
Wow.
yeah.
Well, I love what you're doing because it's supporting those that are, as you said, solving these pain points and problems. And I think this is probably an area that's overlooked often is how do you, and frankly, I love that the passion is a currency. Tucker, do you guys work with organizations outside of DC as well? Is this nonprofits that are not just in
Oh,
DC
for
or
sure.
all over? That's what I thought.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we worked with uh, all over, actually, all over the country. We're looking at some actually out of the country, but for right now, yeah, we've actually done work with some churches too.
Nice.
Which are really, actually churches are fascinating because they're very similar to nonprofits. They have an added layer of complexity in that
Yeah.
like congregations or members or however you want to call it. But we worked with a really awesome church down in New Orleans, actually.
Oh, wow.
It's, same thing. Like,
Yeah.
how do we as a church actually show that we're having real value to people?
Right.
Right. And to me, like, this is my theology coming out, but it's like, to me, Jesus was super practical.
Mm-hmm.
He connected with people where they were right there,
Yeah.
and had like on earth impact. Like,
Yeah.
right. It wasn't just this abstract theology of like,
Met them where they're at.
whatever that means. It's like, yeah, like right there. And to me, a lot of churches, consider like conversions, like real value. And I'm not saying it is or isn't on this podcast, because that's a whole other discussion.
Right.
But what I am saying is that Jesus met people where they were, and help, frankly, solve pain. The woman at the well, is a good example of that. Zacchaeus was a good. There's these people, even his disciples, like these people, like he met them where they were at, and sometimes called them out on their bullshit. But sorry, I've said that a few times.
No, it's okay. Just a little earmuff thing. It's all good.
But so even from a church's perspective, how do we know that people are improving their lives? Like,
right.
How do we what kind of indicators do we put together
that
help us understand that these married couples are able to improve their marriage, for example, or parents are able to improve, build better relationships with their kids? Because I guarantee you, like, that's all throughout the Bible for sure.
Totally. Yeah.
How do we actually think about this? Like, what are indicators of us being able to actually do it? So it's very relevant to churches. It's certainly relevant to nonprofits, associations too. Kevin, my co-founder, was the CEO of the American Diabetes Association.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so,
very cool.
Yeah, so he comes from like big nonprofit worlds, and has done a lot of turnaround stuff on the revenue side and the financial side. Before that, he was the CEO of Feed the Children, which is a huge nonprofit out of Oklahoma.
Wow.
But all like turnaround. His stories are just unbelievable. So anyway, all to be said, yeah, we work with nonprofits all across the country. Our backyard is DC, and there's a ton of them here, so it's not like there's a shortage.
No.
All over the country. Yeah.
Well, and just to let those listening in, I didn't really bring this up yet, but because I was going to say, we made the reference earlier. People are like, what do you mean yesterday you talked about nonprofits? I'm like, oh, we probably should reference that.
Oh, yeah.
Right. People are like, what are you talking about? So I'm really grateful. I'll share this really quick because I actually met you, Tucker, because you have partnered with DCTV. Thrive Impact has partnered with DCTV to create this incredible new show, yet to be aired, but will be, called District Life. And it is all about showing the best of DC, including nonprofits and, looking at those that are really adding to the thriving of the city. And I'm grateful. Somehow, I really am not quite sure, but it doesn't really matter how. By the grace of,
because you are seriously awesome.
Thank you. By the grace of something, I got chosen. There's 3 of us that are hosts, and this is where when I learned about you and what you do, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm all about thriving and the best of the best, and appreciative inquiry and curiosity, and that divine spark and living it out, no matter what that looks like. I was like, I don't know what's happening, but this is an amazing fit from what you do. And so we interviewed some of those amazing nonprofits yesterday, and I just have to say, it's there are so many ways to give back and to be focused on what is working, because I think whether it's the negative bias, or if you are into drama, or just we can easily focus on what's not working. And that's part of what I love about who you are, about Thrive Impact, about this new show, is
Mhm.
really looking to see what is working, how can we support those,
Yeah.
and what is, so anyhow, that's the reference from
Yeah,
before.
yeah, good reference.
I was like,
It's
we
because you're
interviewed a few.
amazing, Julie.
What'd you say?
We had a lot of applicants for that,
Oh,
and you really were like stellar. So
oh,
it's an honor to have you as part of this show.
thank you. It's so fun. It's beyond fun, you guys. It's like
It's super fun.
just highlighting amazing people and talking. And obviously, I like to talk, and it's fun. And Tucker's awesome. So it's a win-win, win,
Yeah,
win.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, Super fun. All right. Before we wrap up, I always like to get a sense of kind of, you talked about, I think, this program you did around possibilities and the future, and just like legacy kind of, if you were to paint a picture for the future and could look at what could be and what's possible, what are you up to? Like, what, looking back, let's say you're in your, 104, because you're going to be here for a long time. 112, I don't know, by then there'll be way more that we can do. So what are some of the things that you feel like you are a stand for, and you hope that both Thrive Impact does? I mean, this is kind of a deep question, so take it however you'd like.
I mean, for me, it's just helping people thrive. I mean, it really is helping people thrive. Like um, I love seeing people find who they are and start to shine in it. I think it's Albert Einstein. I don't remember, but it's like everybody has a genius, but if you judge a fish on its ability to climb a tree, it's going to feel like a failure its whole life or something like that.
That's a good point.
It's like, and I've experienced this myself. Like, I've been fired from quite a few different jobs before.
Yeah.
Part of that's because my strength was not managed. And I became a bulldozer and was like, "You all people," again.
Right.
I learned a lot.
Play to your strengths.
Yeah. I also find I work well in a little more of an entrepreneurial environment. And part of that's just like, there's this old school Michael W. Smith song for all you oldies but goodies, but it was like, my place in this world. We're all just trying to find that place. Like, what is my place? What is my role here? And, if I can help somebody, just figure out, learn, be able to lean a little bit and move the needle some for them to like start to go in that direction of like, what is their place in this world?
Yeah.
Obviously, again, I'm focused a lot on nonprofits from a Thrive Impact perspective. But even like, like for me, like even like marriages, like I hate the fact that more than half of all marriages end in divorce. Like, nobody gets married wanting to get divorced. That's terrible. There's pain. There's pain there.
Yeah.
Like, how can we find better pathways for people to, because when we get married, generally speaking, to be married, to find love, to find connection, to be in that place. But divorce is a big deal. It's very real.
Yeah.
It's very prevalent. And is there a way for us to mitigate some of that pain? So, and that's just like an example. Like, how do I help people? Like, that's what I want to do, is whether it's nonprofits, which is again a lot of where my heart lies at this, especially at this point, and a lot of the work that I've done, because they're just good people. Like, I love nonprofit people.
Yeah, totally.
They're already by nature typically want to help.
Yeah,
and like and I want to help them be more helpful, if you will. But just like help marriages be better, help dads be better dads, because again, like going back to the deadbeat dad thing, I don't think, I think dads want to, when people have children, they want to be good dads and good moms.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I don't think anybody sets out to not be that, but it still happens.
Right.
Right. And I get it. Like, I've set out to do things that didn't ultimately happen. I was like, oh, like I set out to have some of these jobs. There's a nonprofit I worked at that it was a mutual divorce of sorts. There's still a LinkedIn recommendation for me, which I was by the CEO, which is gracious of them.
Right.
But yet, like, in all reality, I was fired.
Right. That's what happened. Right.
Very gracious firing, but like, it wasn't a good fit.
Right.
I didn't set out for that.
Right.
Like, that was a painful time. That was hard.
Right.
So I think for me, that's what I hope is is to be there for people when they're going through hard times, and just, there's a Brene Brown quote that I love so deeply because I've experienced the power of this, is that shame that is spoken and met with empathy cannot survive.
Mm.
And I've had those experiences where I've been able to speak my shame, speaking to the whole victim situation. Like, I was in an exercise where it was a pairing, and I spoke my shame, and it was this whole victim, and I was pissed. I didn't realize how much emotion was there.
Yeah.
Pissed from this situation that happened to me, it was 4 years ago. I was angry. I didn't even realize how angry I was until I started sharing about it. Somebody who was just listening.
Yeah.
Right. And when I was able to do that, and then I was able to shift it into what's my non-victim story here. I mean, it was powerful to get it all out and not be isolated and let it sit there and become toxin for me.
Right.
And like shape the story differently, and like, well, no, this is my story though. I need to be in choice around this. How do I do that?
Yeah.
So if I can be that, my wife and I can be that for a couple, or if I can help my kids be like, how do we build pathways of connection with others, so that way we can not be so isolated in this life.
Yeah.
Because we're not built for isolation. We're not built for loneliness. The whole, John Wayne approach of like, I pulled up my bootstraps and I did it by myself. Like, nobody is self-made.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah. So that's what I want to do.
So awesome. I love it. There are so many nuggets of wisdom. Just for everyone listening, I always say, if you're driving, do not write. Keep driving. The show notes are here. I'm going to write them out for you. Because there's so much of what you said around, gaining that self-awareness and being curious, allowing yourself to be vulnerable, getting out of victim mode, looking at your beliefs. I mean, there's so many nuggets here that are important. I also love this idea of choice, of extreme ownership, I think is the way you said it. And really the have to versus the choice, the choosing to. In the end, we get to, we all decide in every moment. And it's inspiring. You're just a human being. What I love is that as a human being, you're really in the dance of asking that question and living it. And then actually, like, your whole livelihood is around helping others to do that. And I so admire you and what you're up to. And for anyone who's part of a nonprofit or church or association or community that feels like this would be helpful, I just encourage you to reach out to Tucker and look up Thrive Impact, and just, there's so much wisdom here. My gosh.
Thank you. No, I appreciate it. And I just feel grateful, honestly, to be able to help, like, if I can. So it's fun though too. I mean, I want to do fun projects with people that I like, and
totally. Why not?
That's why I like nonprofit people, because they all want to help the world, and I think they're my kind of people.
Yeah.
And I feel so I'm grateful to be able to do that, and hopefully help some, and have ultimately more impact in the world. Help these nonprofits, like DCTV is a good example of meaningful media out in the world.
Yeah, totally.
And creating more purposeful community. That's actually in their mission statement that we help them write. And it's creating more purposeful community in the district. Like, that's awesome. That's
awesome. All right, one last question. This is like the funny thing, you guys. I always am like, I could just keep talking to you for hours because it's so fun and it's so easy. And I'm like, I'm just getting so much.
As we wrap up. Oh, one more question.
One more question. I'm the worst. I'm like, all right, I should end, but I don't want to. For people that, there's so many different ways to get involved with nonprofits and to give back and to be involved. And I don't know, I kind of feel like for those listening who are like, all right, I may not work in a nonprofit, but I want to do something. I want to be involved. Do you have any just tips or ways to kind of make an impact, make a difference? Maybe some of the nonprofits you've worked with, or just any suggestions for people who are like, maybe more than, we can always give money, which is great. But there are other ways too.
Yeah. That's actually a really great question. I think that, to me, we all, this is getting back to the good inside of everybody. We all want to have impact with our lives. I think underneath it all, we want to help be of service to others. And to use the old MLK quote, Martin Luther King, everybody can be great because everybody can serve. You don't need a college degree to serve. You don't need
Right.
you don't need to, I don't remember all the things he talked about, but
Have a
you know,
business yeah.
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 But it is this whole element around like finding the ways to serve, and I think to me, service is actually a little bit vulnerable.
Yeah.
When you put yourself out there a little bit, whether it is money to the person on the street or just money to an or whatever. But I think is finding those ways to serve, whether it's, I think about just like moving the needle a little bit for yourself, with like, who is somebody in your immediate life that you're like, I could do just a little bit more intentionality around them. And I can, how might I just like think about them with curiosity?
Yeah.
Like how do we start to move our own needle? Like I've realized this even with my own wife or with my children or with a neighbor down the street. I was like, you know what? Let me just find a small way, like go out of my way, and we've all had people probably done something small for us that was seemingly insignificant thing that actually made all the difference.
Totally.
Like start small.
Yeah.
That kind of way. To the answer around like nonprofits and especially around giving to nonprofits, I would say there are a lot of nonprofits out there, and this is to the point, like and there's a thrust in general out there, and we're part of this whole thrust, which is nonprofits need to have impact. Like they can't just get away with doing nice things because you actually don't know if they're nice or not.
Right.
And so if you're giving to a nonprofit or wanting to give to a nonprofit, ask them, how do they measure their impact? And it sometimes can get really nuanced, but many times they answer by telling you what they're doing, not by what impact they're having. So try to dig a little bit more around like, well, how do you, and even to the point of, generally speaking, like with food nonprofits, for example, if they're like producing food for people,
right,
or giving, like they're helping, they're solving a really basic need, that's probably fine. But even then, like, are they creating dependencies that are not, that don't actually fit with human psychology of sorts? Where Toxic Charity comes into play. That's, again, such a great book, but is look for what positive change are they trying to create, and are they have some form of measurement around creating that? Because at the end of the day, what we want to do with our dollars even is we want that dollar to translate into something.
Yeah.
Right? That's why, college giving, for example, and giving to alma maters has dramatically decreased, because it used to be around out of duty. Like we gave because that was the right thing to do.
Right.
And now, especially with millennials, this is a huge thrust around millennials. We want to actually give and that actually do something, have a positive change.
Yeah. For sure.
So that's where it's just ask some of those questions around like, how do you measure your impact? How do you, what are you, I know you're feeding, people or whatever it is these nonprofits are doing. Right. But how do you know if you're having an impact? Like, what kind of measurements do you do? It's not going to be perfect. You can help like lower the load for them, because sometimes nonprofit leaders are like, I'm not sure how to answer this question because for this perfect thing. And you can say, I'm not looking for the perfect answer. Yeah. I'm just curious, like, how are you shaping the nonprofit so that it's able to measure the work that it's doing to make sure it's having the impact it wants to have? And then you can see if they're not measuring impact in any way, shape, or form. Honestly, I wouldn't give to them. Because you actually have no idea. You could be hurting, you could be helping. We don't know. Right. It may sound nice,
right?
But we have no idea, right? And
totally.
So, anyway.
Great. No, that's so great. And I also love what you said in the beginning. For those listening too, it's like, think about your circle, and even people where you could be intentional and how you can serve even friends, family, people in your community. I love how you said that as well. Like even upping your own intentionality of serving those around you, being more in tune, offering an ear. I mean, there's so many ways, but I love that aspect as well as the nonprofit. So great. Oh my God. This was such a great, there's so much in this. I'm like, how am I going to capture all the notes? But I'm going to try. I'm going to aim to try. And darn, Tucker, you're awesome. You're awesome.
Usually I'm like, pew, 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 pew. There's like all these.
It's awesome.
No, it's not always like a concise little story. So appreciate you rabbit trail so much, because I sure did.
Well, thank you for what you're doing, who you're being in the world, the impact that you're making, the way you're helping people to thrive. And that your energy has been contagious. It brought me in, and I'm just
Oh, good.
thankful to have been able to share who you are and what you're up to. And yeah, for everyone listening in, we'll have all of the Thrive Impact info on the show notes so you can connect, and we'll be putting this on social media. And just thank you again for who you are being in the world, really, for solving the pain and for just helping us to elevate really of humanity and consciousness, all of that.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. That's awesome. I appreciate your work. I love even the title, your USTO. I was like, oh my gosh, it's my jam. That's like, and you totally exude that too. And just how you've been a part of this process, even, with the show that we were working on together. And I mean, you live it too. And your gratitude is so contagious. Like that's one thing I've noticed about you is how you are just like so encouraging and so full of gratitude, and just like, oh, maybe I should be more grateful for things in my life. You just exude it. It's very
Aw,
inspiring. So I appreciate the work that you're doing for sure.
thank you so much.